The blood-red sunset painted the Arizona sky as Lillian Lawrence stood at the fence line of her father's sprawling cattle ranch, watching a lone rider approach from the distant mountains. It was the summer of 1876, and at 20 years old, Lillian had seen enough strangers pass through Wallace Valley to know when someone was different. This rider moved differently, fluid and natural, as if he and his horse were one being. Even from this distance, she could tell he wasn't one of the usual cowboys looking for work or the troublemakers her father constantly warned her about. George Lawrence, owner of the largest cattle ranch in Wallace, Arizona Territory, had built his empire from nothing after moving west 15 years earlier. A widower since Lillian was 12, he'd grown increasingly protective of his only daughter and increasingly suspicious of outsiders. "Lillian," her father's voice boomed from the ranch house porch. "Sun's going down. Come inside now." "Just a minute, Pa," she called back, her eyes never leaving the approaching rider. As the figure drew closer, Lillian could make out his features, the strong jawline, the dark hair that fell past his shoulders, and clothing that marked him not as a white settler but as Apache. Her heart quickened, not with fear but with curiosity. The tensions between settlers and the Apache had been growing worse in recent years, yet this man rode openly toward their ranch. Lillian Lawrence. Her father's voice held that edge that meant he wouldn't ask again. With a sigh, she turned and walked back to the house, her simple blue dress swishing around her ankles, her long brown hair gathered in a braid that swung with each step. She'd spent her entire life on this ranch, and while she loved it deeply, she yearned for something more, something beyond the predictable rhythm of ranch life and the limited future her father envisioned for her. "There's a rider coming," she said as she climbed the porch steps. Her father's weathered face hardened. "Apache," she nodded. "Looks to be." George Lawrence reached for his rifle that always stood by the door. "Get inside." "Pa, he doesn't look like he's here to cause trouble." "I'll be the judge of that," he replied, stepping off the porch. Lillian watched through the window as her father stood at the gate, rifle not raised but clearly visible. The rider stopped a respectful distance away and raised one hand in greeting. "State your business," her father called out, his voice carrying through the open window. "I am Geeton Pawnee. I scout for U.S. Army at Fort Bowie. Colonel Harrison send me. I have letter." The man's English was accented but clear as he slowly reached into his leather pouch and produced an envelope. Lillian watched as her father took the letter, never taking his eyes off the Apache man. After reading it, her father's posture relaxed slightly, though suspicion remained etched on his face. "Come on in, then. But I'm watching you." The Apache man Geeton dismounted with a fluid grace that made Lillian's breath catch. He was tall, with broad shoulders and movements that reminded her of the mountain lions that sometimes prowled the hills around the ranch, powerful but controlled. His face bore the proud features of his people, and his eyes, dark and perceptive, seemed to take in everything at once. When her father brought him into the house, those eyes met Lillian's and something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, or simply awareness. Whatever it was, it sent a warmth spreading through her chest. "This is my daughter, Lillian," her father said stiffly. "Lillian, this is Mr. Pawnee. He's been sent by Colonel Harrison to help track some rustlers that have been hitting ranches in the territory." "Miss Lawrence," Geeton said with a respectful nod. "Mr. Pawnee," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Her father gestured to the dining table. "Let's discuss what the colonel has in mind." As the men sat down, Lillian moved to prepare coffee, stealing glances at their visitor. She'd never seen an Apache up close before. The newspapers and gossip in town painted them all as savages, but the man sitting at their table seemed anything but. His buckskin clothing was well made, his manner respectful, and when he spoke, his words were carefully chosen. 3 ranches hit in past month, Geeton was saying. Colonel thinks same men, they know land well, move fast. Army patrol too slow, too loud, I track better. And why our ranch? Her father asked. Your ranch biggest, most cattle, not hit yet. Colonel think they come here next. Lillian set the coffee cups on the table, and when she placed one before Geeton, their fingers brushed momentarily. She felt a jolt, like lightning traveling up her arm, and quickly pulled her hand away. When she looked up, he was watching her with those intense eyes. "Thank you," he said softly. Her father cleared his throat pointedly. "Lillian, that'll be all." "I should prepare a room for Mr. Pawnee," she said. Her father frowned. "He'll stay in the bunkhouse with the hands." "The bunkhouse is full with the new men you hired for the roundup," she reminded him. George Lawrence looked displeased but nodded curtly. "Fine, the small room off the kitchen." "I need no special arrangement," Geeton said. "I can sleep outside, used to it." "Nonsense," Lillian said before her father could agree. "We have the room, I'll prepare it now." As she left, she could feel Geeton's eyes following her, and her cheeks flushed with warmth that had nothing to do with the summer heat. That night, after her father had retired, Lillian found herself drawn to the porch. The moon was full, casting silver light across the ranch yard. In the distance, she could see a figure sitting perfectly still on a large rock that overlooked the valley. Geeton. Without thinking, she stepped off the porch and walked toward him. He heard her approach, of course he did, and turned his head slightly. "Miss Lawrence, you should be inside." "Not safe at night." "This is my home, Mr. Pawnee. I know every inch of it." She stopped a few feet away from him. "May I join you?" He seemed surprised but nodded, shifting slightly to make room on the rock. Lillian sat down, carefully arranging her skirts. For a long moment they sat in silence, looking out at the moonlit landscape. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she finally said. "Yes. Your land rich with life." "It's my father's land," she corrected. Geeton shook his head slightly. "No one owned land. Land was here before people will be after. We only borrow." The idea was so contrary to everything she'd been taught, but something about it resonated with her. "I've never thought of it that way. Your people build fences. My people follow the land's rhythms." He glanced at her. "You different from most white women I meet. You look at me, not through me." His directness caught her off guard. I've been taught to judge people by their actions, not by what others say about them." "Good teaching." He looked back at the valley. "Your father not feel same way." "My father has seen a lot of hardship. It's made him cautious. Cautious good, hate not good." He turned to face her fully. "Why you come out here, Miss Lawrence?" The question was simple, but the answer wasn't. Why had she sought him out? "I suppose I'm curious about you, about your people." "We don't get many visitors from outside Wallace, especially not." "Apache," he finished for her. "Yes. I am Kairikahua Apache, my mother's people. My father was French trapper. I have foot in 2 worlds, belong to neither fully." He spoke matter-of-factly, without self-pity. "That must be difficult," he shrugged. "Is what is, makes me good scout. I understand both ways." He studied her face in the moonlight. "You also look beyond fence lines. I see it in your eyes." Lillian felt exposed, as if he had peered directly into her soul. "I love this ranch, but sometimes I wonder if there's more to life than what I can see from my porch." "There is," he said simply. "Much more." They talked for over an hour, Lillian asking about his life, his travels, the places he'd seen. Geeton was reserved at first, answering in short sentences, but gradually opened up, describing the mountains where he'd grown up, the desert blooming after rain, the stars that guided his people. His voice changed when he spoke of these things, softer, more melodic. When she finally stood to return to the house, she found herself reluctant to leave. "Will you be staying long?" she asked. "Until rustlers caught. Few days, maybe week." He rose as well, standing a respectful distance from her. "Good night, Miss Lawrence, Lillian," she said. "Please call me Lillian." A slight smile touched his lips. "Lillian," he repeated, her name sounding different in his voice, more musical. "Good night." "Good night, Geaton." She walked back to the house, feeling his eyes on her until she closed the door behind her. That night, she dreamed of open skies and a freedom she had never known. The next morning, Lillian awoke earlier than usual. She dressed quickly and headed to the kitchen to prepare breakfast, finding Geaton already there, speaking with Miguel, their cook. "Good morning," she said, suddenly conscious of her hastily braided hair. Both men turned. Miguel nodded respectfully. "Morning, Miss Lillian. Mr. Pawnee was just asking about the ranch layout." "I show Miguel where tracks I found yesterday," Geaton explained, unfolding a rough map on the table. "Rustlers came close 2 nights ago, looking, not taking yet." Lillian moved closer to see. "How can you tell? Tracks different when men scout versus when they drive cattle." "These men careful, but I read sign." There was no boasting in his voice, just quiet confidence. "What's your plan?" "Ride perimeter today. Set traps not to catch, but to warn when they come." Miguel excused himself to begin breakfast as ranch hands would be arriving soon. When he left, Lillian found herself alone with Geaton. Would it be possible for me to ride with you today?" she asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Geaton's eyebrows rose slightly. "Your father would not approve." "I know this land as well as anyone. I could help." He studied her face for a moment. "You ride well, since I was 5 years old." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "We leave after breakfast. You convince your father." Convincing George Lawrence proved more difficult than she anticipated. They argued over breakfast, her father adamant that it was too dangerous, Lillian equally determined. "I'll have Mr. Pawnee with me the entire time," she insisted. "And we won't go beyond our property lines." "Absolutely not." "I won't have my daughter gallivanting around with—" He stopped himself, glancing at Geaton, who sat quietly at the far end of the table. "With what, Pa? An Apache?" Lillian challenged, her cheeks flushing with anger. "Colonel Harrison trusts him enough to send him here. Why can't you?" Her father's jaw tightened. "This isn't about trust, it's about propriety. A young woman doesn't spend the day alone with a man she's just met." "We'll take Eduardo with us," she countered, referring to one of their most trusted ranch hands. "Will that satisfy your sense of propriety?" After further argument, her father finally relented, though his displeasure was evident. An hour later, Lillian, Geaton, and Eduardo rode out from the ranch, following the northern fence line. Lillian felt a sense of freedom she hadn't experienced in years, away from the confines of the ranch house and her father's watchful eye. Geaton rode slightly ahead, his posture relaxed, but his eyes constantly scanning the landscape. Occasionally, he would stop, dismount, and examine something on the ground that was invisible to Lillian. Each time he did, she watched in fascination as he read the story written in the earth. "How did you learn to track like that?" she asked during one such stop. "My mother's brother taught me when I was boy. He was best tracker in our band." Geaton pointed to faint depressions in the dirt. "See here, 4 men on horseback. One horse has split shoe. They passed 2 days ago, going north." Lillian leaned down from her horse, trying to see what he saw. "I can barely make out any tracks at all. Takes practice. Many years." He straightened up. "Your eyes see other things I miss. We all have gifts." "What things do I see?" she asked, curious. He mounted his horse again before answering. "You see inside people. You look at me and see person, not just Apache. Rare gift." His words warmed her. As they continued riding, Eduardo hanging back a respectful distance, Lillian found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone: her dreams of seeing the world beyond Wallace, her love of books, her mother's death when she was young. Geeton listened without judgment, occasionally offering insights from his own experiences that showed a wisdom beyond his years. "How old are you, Geeton?" she asked as they stopped to water the horses at a small stream. 26 winters, he replied. "And you?" 20. She hesitated, then asked, "Have you ever been married?" A shadow crossed his face. "Was promised to Najaya, daughter of my mother's cousin. She died of fever 4 winters ago." "I'm sorry," Lillian said softly. He nodded once in acknowledgement. "Life continues, as must we." They remounted and rode on, checking the western boundary of the ranch. By mid-afternoon, Geeton had set several small warning systems, arrangements of stones and sticks that would be disturbed if anyone passed, giving him a way to track intruders. As the sun began its descent, they turned back toward the ranch house. They were crossing an open meadow when Geeton suddenly raised his hand, signaling them to stop. He sat perfectly still on his horse, listening. "What is it?" Lillian whispered. "Riders coming, fast." He pointed to a copse of trees. "Go there, hide." Eduardo rode closer. "How many?" 3, maybe 4. Geeton's expression was grim. "Go with her, protect." "What about you?" Lillian asked, alarmed. "I lead them away, meet you at ranch." Without waiting for a response, he urged his horse forward, riding directly toward the approaching riders. Eduardo grabbed Lillian's reins. "Come, Miss Lillian, we must go." "But now." Eduardo's urgent tone brooked no argument. They galloped toward the trees, taking cover just as 4 riders crested the hill. Lillian watched as Geeton rode in a direction that would intersect their path, making himself visible. The riders spotted him and immediately gave chase, exactly as he had intended. "We should help him," Lillian said, starting to move her horse forward. Eduardo blocked her path. "No, miss. He knows what he does. We go back to ranch, get help." She knew he was right, but the thought of Geeton facing 4 men alone filled her with dread. Reluctantly, she followed Eduardo as they skirted the edge of the property, taking a longer but safer route back to the ranch. By the time they arrived, the sun had nearly set. Her father was on the porch, rifle in hand, his face a thundercloud. "Where have you been? And where's Pawnee?" Lillian quickly explained what had happened. George Lawrence immediately called for his foreman and several hands. "Saddle up. We've got rustlers on our land and a man out there alone." Lillian was surprised by her father's concern for Geeton. As the men prepared to ride out, she turned to her father. "I'm coming too." "Absolutely not," he responded. "You've done enough for one day. Pa, I know where we last saw him. I can lead you there faster than Eduardo." Her father hesitated, then reluctantly nodded. "You stay with me the whole time. First sign of trouble, you ride straight back here. Understood?" "Yes, sir." They rode out with 8 men, all armed and ready for a fight. Lillian's heart pounded with fear for Geeton, and with each passing minute her worry grew. They had just reached the meadow where they'd separated when a lone rider approached from the east. "It's him!" Lillian cried, recognizing Geeton's silhouette against the darkening sky. As he drew closer, they could see his shirt was torn and there was blood on his arm, but he sat tall in the saddle. "What happened?" George Lawrence demanded. "Rustlers," Geeton confirmed. 4 men. I lead them away, lose them in canyon, circle back." He glanced at Lillian, a brief look of relief crossing his face when he saw she was safe. "They come tonight. I hear them talk. Plan to take North Herd at midnight." Her father's expression hardened. "Then we'll be waiting for them." He turned to his foreman. "Jenkins, get the men ready. We'll set up an ambush." As they rode back to the ranch, Lillian maneuvered her horse alongside Geeton's. "You're hurt," she said, nodding toward his bloody arm. "Small cut. Nothing." Let me tend to it when we get back." He looked as if he might refuse, but instead gave a small nod. "Thank you." At the ranch, while the men prepared for the night's ambush, Lillian led Geeton to the kitchen. She gathered clean cloths, a basin of water, and the bottle of whiskey her father kept for medicinal purposes. "Sit," she instructed, pointing to a chair. He complied, removing his buckskin shirt to reveal the cut on his upper arm and a torso marked with older scars that told stories of a hard life. Lillian tried not to stare as she cleaned the wound, which was indeed not serious but deep enough to need attention. "How did this happen?" she asked as she worked. "One had knife. I was not quite fast enough." There was a hint of self-deprecation in his voice. "You're fortunate it wasn't worse facing 4 men alone. Was not trying to fight, only lead away." He winced slightly as she applied the whiskey to the cut. "Sorry," she murmured. "It needs to be cleaned properly." He nodded stoically. "You have healer's hands, gentle." Their eyes met, and Lillian felt that same inexplicable connection she'd experienced when they first saw each other. For a moment, neither spoke, the silence between them charged with unspoken feelings. The kitchen door swung open, breaking the spell as her father entered. He paused, taking in the scene, his daughter tending to the half-dressed Apache scout, and his expression darkened. "Lillian, that's enough. Jenkins' wife can finish that. We need to discuss tonight's plan." She straightened, handing Geeton a clean cloth. "I'm nearly done, Pa. The cut isn't deep." Her father's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue further. "Very well. Mr. Pawnee, when you're decent, join us in the study." After he left, Lillian quickly bandaged Geeton's arm. "There, that should hold. Thank you." He put his shirt back on, his movements careful. Before standing, he looked at her intently. "You should stay inside tonight, lock doors." "I will." She hesitated, then added, "Please be careful." Something softened in his expression. "I will return. Promise." The simple words carried a weight that made her heart flutter. As he left to join her father, Lillian found herself offering a silent prayer for his safety and for all the men who would face danger that night. The hours that followed were among the longest of Lillian's life. She sat in the parlor, unable to sleep, listening for any sound that might indicate what was happening. Her father had been clear she was to stay in the house with Miguel and his wife, doors locked, rifle ready. Just after midnight, she heard distant gunshots, 3 in quick succession, then 2 more. She rushed to the window but could see nothing in the darkness. More shots followed and what sounded like shouting. Then silence. It was nearly 2 hours later when riders approached the ranch house. Lillian peered through the curtains, recognizing her father at the head of the group. She threw open the door, counting the men searching for Geeton. "Pa, what happened?" George Lawrence dismounted, looking tired but satisfied. "We got them. All 4. 2 wounded, none of our men hurt." Where are the others?" she asked, still not seeing Geeton. "Taking the prisoners to town. Sheriff will hold them for the federal marshal." He looked at her closely. "Pawnee's fine. He's bringing up the rear with Jenkins." Relief washed over her. As if summoned by her thoughts, 2 more riders appeared in the yard, Jenkins and Geeton. Even in the dim light from the house, she could see Geeton was unharmed, and the knowledge made her knees weak with relief. Her father noticed her reaction and frowned slightly. "Lillian, go put some coffee on. The men could use it." She nodded and retreated to the kitchen, grateful for something to do with her shaking hands. As she prepared the coffee, she heard the men talking in the yard, her father giving instructions for the morning. A few minutes later, boots sounded on the porch and several men filed into the house. Geeton was among the last to enter. His eyes immediately found hers, and he gave her a small nod that conveyed more than words could have. He was safe. He had kept his promise. The men recounted the night's events over coffee, how they had surprised the rustlers as they attempted to drive off a dozen head of cattle, how Geaton's warning signals had alerted them to exactly where the thieves would strike, how his tracking skills had been invaluable. Lillian watched as her father's attitude toward Geaton subtly shifted. There was a new respect in the way he addressed him, including him in the discussion of what would happen next. "The marshal will want your testimony," George was saying. "Means you'll need to stay a few more days." Geaton nodded. "I will stay as long as needed." As the men began to disperse, heading for well-deserved rest, Lillian caught Geaton's eye. "Thank you," she said simply, "for keeping everyone safe." "Was my job," he replied, but the look in his eyes suggested it had become more than duty. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Geaton continued to patrol the ranch boundaries, making sure no accomplices of the captured rustlers remained. Each evening he would join them for dinner, and afterward, Lillian would find reasons to linger in the parlor or on the porch, creating opportunities for conversation. Her father noticed, of course. 4 days after the rustlers were captured, he called Lillian into his study. "This has to stop, Lillian," he said without preamble. She feigned ignorance. "What does, Pa? Don't play innocent with me. I see how you look at that man, how you find excuses to be near him." His voice was stern but not angry. "He's Apache. You're my daughter, there's no future there." "We're just talking, Pa. He's interesting. He's seen places I've only read about. It's more than talk, and you know it." He sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "Lillian, I want what's best for you. A good life, a family." "Harvey Peterson has been asking to court you." "Harvey Peterson," she interrupted, incredulous. "He's 35 and has buried 2 wives already. He's established, respectable. He could provide for you." "I don't need providing for." "I need—" She stopped, not sure how to articulate what she felt. "What? What do you need that I haven't given you?" "Understanding, Pa. I need you to understand that I want more from life than being a rancher's wife in Wallace. I want to see the world, to learn to make my own choices." George Lawrence looked at his daughter as if truly seeing her for the first time. "And you think an Apache scout can give you those things? Lillian, be realistic. Even if I approved, which I don't, the world would never accept such a match. You'd be ostracized, cut off from decent society." "Maybe decent society isn't as decent as it pretends to be," she replied quietly. Her father stood, his expression hardening. "I've indulged this foolishness long enough. The marshal arrives tomorrow to collect the prisoners. Mr. Pawnee will leave with him. End of discussion." He strode from the room, leaving Lillian feeling as if the walls were closing in around her. She had known, of course, that Geaton wouldn't stay forever, but having a definite departure date made the reality too painful to ignore. That evening she found herself once again drawn to the rock where she and Geaton had first talked. As if sensing her need, he was there, looking out at the stars. "Your father angry?" he said as she approached. Not a question. "Yes." She sat beside him, not caring about propriety. "He says you're leaving tomorrow. Marshal comes. My job here done." He turned to look at her, his dark eyes reflecting the starlight. "But I not want to leave." The simple admission made her heart race. "I don't want you to go either," she whispered. For a long moment they sat in silence, the weight of unspoken feelings hanging between them. Finally, Geaton spoke, his voice low and intense. "When I was boy, my mother tells story of how earth and sky were once lovers, torn apart when world was created. Earth below, sky above, forever reaching for each other but never touching. But every day, earth sends mountains rising up, trees growing tall trying to touch sky, and sky sends rain, sunlight, snow reaching down to touch earth." He looked into her eyes. "First time I see you, I think, she is like sky, so far above me but I still reach." Tears welled in Lillian's eyes at the beauty of his words. "I'm not above you, Geaton. In your world you are. Your father right about that. I have nothing to offer but myself." "That's all I want," she said, surprising herself with her boldness. "Just you." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her cheek with gentle fingers. "Lillian Lawrence," he murmured, "you are the sky to my earth, beautiful, vast, full of light." She leaned into his touch, her heart pounding. "Then let me reach for you, as the sky reaches for the earth." When his lips met hers, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, a connection that transcended the barriers between them. His kiss was gentle yet passionate, a promise and a question all at once. Lillian answered by wrapping her arms around his neck, drawing him closer, pouring all her confused emotions into this one perfect moment. When they finally separated, both breathless, Geaton rested his forehead against hers. "This make everything more difficult," he said softly. "I know." She closed her eyes, savoring his nearness. "What are we going to do?" He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally he straightened, his expression resolute. "I speak to your father tomorrow, properly." Alarm flashed through her. "He won't understand." "Maybe not. But I respect him, will not dishonor his daughter by secret meetings." His integrity only made her love him more, though the word love frightened her with its finality, its power. Was that what this was? This overwhelming feeling that had grown in the span of just a few days. "Come back with me to the house," she said. "It's getting cold." They walked back together, not touching but close enough that their shoulders occasionally brushed, each contact sending sparks through Lillian's body. At the porch steps they paused. "Good night, Lillian Lawrence," Geaton said formally. "Good night, Geaton Pawnee," she replied with equal formality, though her heart was anything but formal. She watched him walk to the small room off the kitchen, already missing his presence. Tomorrow would bring challenges she couldn't foresee, but tonight, for the first time in her life, Lillian felt truly alive. The next morning dawned clear and hot, the Arizona sun relentless even in the early hours. Lillian dressed with special care, selecting her best day dress, a soft blue that brought out the color of her eyes. She wasn't sure what Geaton planned to say to her father, but she wanted to be prepared. She found both men in the dining room, an uncomfortable silence hanging between them. Her father nodded curtly at her entrance. "Morning, Pa, Mr. Pawnee." "Lillian," her father replied. "Mr. Pawnee has just informed me that the marshal will be delayed until tomorrow. Apparently there was trouble in Tucson." "I see." She took her seat, careful to maintain a proper distance from Geaton. "Will you continue your patrols today, Mr. Pawnee?" Before he could answer, her father spoke. "Actually, Mr. Pawnee has requested a private conversation with me this morning, said it was important." The look he gave Geaton was searching, suspicious. "It is important," Geaton confirmed, his voice steady. "After breakfast, if convenient." George Lawrence studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "My study. 8 o'clock." The meal passed in tense silence. Lillian's appetite had deserted her, anxiety twisting her stomach into knots. When her father and Geaton left for the study, she remained at the table, straining to hear their voices but catching only murmurs. 10 minutes passed. 15. 20. Then the study door opened and her father's voice rang out, louder now and sharp with anger. "Absolutely not. The very idea is preposterous." Lillian's heart sank. She had known, of course, that her father would object, but hearing the vehemence in his voice made it real in a way her imaginings hadn't. Geaton emerged from the study, his face a mask of controlled emotion. When he saw her, something flickered in his eyes, regret, determination, she couldn't tell. "Lillian." Her father stood in the doorway. "Come in here now." She rose and walked to the study, passing close to Geaton. "What happened?" she whispered. I spoke truth, he replied softly. Rest is in Great Spirit's hands. George Lawrence closed the study door firmly once Lillian was inside. He paced for a moment, agitation in every line of his body before turning to face her. You know what that man just asked me? He demanded. She shook her head, though she had a good idea. He had the audacity to ask for my permission to court you, to court my daughter. He slammed his hand on the desk. As if such a thing were even possible, did he explain how he felt? Lillian asked, keeping her voice calm though her heart was racing. Oh, he explained. Quite eloquently, in fact. Spoke about respect and honor and providing for you. Her father ran a hand through his hair in frustration. The man doesn't even have a home, Lillian. He lives on an Army Scout's pay, moving from fort to fort. What kind of life is that for you? Maybe it's the life I want. Her father stopped his pacing to stare at her. What did you say? I said maybe that's the life I want. She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze steadily. I care for him, Pa, deeply. You've known him less than a week, and in that time I've learned more about him and myself than I have in years here. She took a deep breath. He's kind, honorable, intelligent. He sees me for who I really am, not just as George Lawrence's daughter. Her father's expression shifted from anger to concern. Lillian, listen to yourself. You're talking about throwing away your future for a man who has nothing to offer you but hardship. That's not true. He offers me freedom, Pa, the chance to see the world beyond Wallace, to live a life that means something. And what about children? Have you thought about that? Any children you had would be half-breeds, outcasts. The crude term stung. They would be loved. That's what matters. George Lawrence sank into his chair, suddenly looking older. I promised your mother I would protect you, give you a good life. I know, Pa, and you have, but I'm not a child anymore. I need to make my own choices, even if they're not the ones you would make for me. I can't give my blessing to this, Lillian. I won't. She had expected this answer, but it hurt nonetheless. Then I'm sorry, Pa, because with or without your blessing, I love him. The words, spoken aloud for the first time, rang with truth. She did love Geeton, with a certainty that defied the short time they'd known each other. Her father stared at her for a long moment, then sighed heavily. Go to your room, Lillian. We'll discuss this again when you've had time to think clearly. I am thinking clearly, Pa. More clearly than I ever have. She left the study, her heart heavy but her resolve strengthened. In the hallway she found Geeton waiting, his expression grave. Your father very angry, he said quietly. Yes, but he'll come around eventually, he has to. Geeton shook his head slightly. Not sure, his concern's valid, life with me not easy. I don't want easy, she replied. I want real. A hint of a smile touched his lips. You are brave, Lillian Lawrence, not brave, just certain. She glanced around to ensure they were alone, then reached for his hand, squeezing it briefly. What will you do now? Continue work until Marshall comes. Then, he hesitated. I will go where Army sends me. And if I wanted to go with you, his eyes widened slightly. You would leave your home, your father, if that's what it takes to be with you, yes. Geeton studied her face intently as if searching for doubt. Finding none, he nodded slowly. Then I will find way to make it possible, but not in anger or haste. We give your father time. His patience and wisdom reminded her again of why she had fallen for him. How much time? Until tomorrow, when Marshall comes. Then we decide. It wasn't the passionate elopement part of her had fantasized about, but she knew he was right. They needed to approach this carefully, for everyone's sake. Until tomorrow, then, she agreed. The day passed with excruciating slowness. Lillian avoided her father, who had ridden out to check on the northern pastures, presumably to clear his head. Geeton resumed his patrols, reinforcing the warning systems he had established around the property. They saw each other only briefly at dinner, exchanging glances that spoke volumes while maintaining a proper distance. That night, unable to sleep, Lillian slipped out onto the porch. The moon was a silver crescent, providing just enough light to see by. She wasn't surprised when Geeton appeared from the shadows as if her thoughts had summoned him. "Could not sleep?" he asked softly, joining her on the porch steps but keeping a respectful distance. "No, too much to think about." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the night sounds of the desert creating a peaceful backdrop. "I spoke with Eduardo today," Geeton finally said. "He say your father good man but stubborn, slow to change mind. That's true, but he loves me, he wants me to be happy. Even if happiness means Apache Scout." There was a trace of bitterness in his voice, even then, eventually. She turned to face him. "My father lost my mother when I was young. It made him protective, afraid of losing me too." Geeton nodded thoughtfully. "Understand fear, but fear poor advisor." "What are you afraid of, Geeton?" The question slipped out before she could consider it. He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then, softly, "Afraid of bringing pain to one I care for. Your life with me would be hard, Lillian. Not just because I am Apache, but because of how I live. Always moving, following trails. No fine house, no society. You think that matters to me, should matter. You deserve comfort, security. I deserve to choose my own path." She moved closer to him, close enough to feel the warmth of his body. "And I choose you, if you'll have me." In answer, he reached for her, drawing her into his arms. His kiss was different this time, deeper, more urgent, filled with the passion they had both been restraining. Lillian responded in kind, her hands tangling in his hair, her body pressed against his. When they finally separated, both breathless, Geeton rested his forehead against hers. "Tomorrow," he whispered. "We decide tomorrow." They reluctantly parted, each returning to their beds though sleep remained elusive. Lillian lay awake, replaying their conversation, strengthening her resolve. Whatever happened tomorrow, she knew her heart belonged to Geeton Pawnee. Morning brought news that changed everything. A rider from town arrived just after breakfast, delivering a telegram for George Lawrence. Lillian watched her father's face pale as he read it. "What is it, Pa?" she asked, concern overriding their lingering tension. "Apache uprising near Fort Bowie," he said grimly. "Renegade band attacked a settlement, 6 dead, including 2 children." Lillian's heart sank. She looked at Geeton, who had gone very still. "Which band?" he asked quietly. "Doesn't say." Her father refolded the telegram. "Marshall's been redirected to Fort Bowie. Won't be coming for the prisoners today." The implications hung heavy in the air. Just as Lillian and Geeton had been about to take a stand, this news would only reinforce her father's opposition to their relationship. "I should go," Geeton said. "Army will need scouts." George Lawrence nodded curtly. "Yes, you should." Lillian felt as if the floor were tilting beneath her feet. "When? Today? Now?" Geeton's face had become a mask, unreadable. "My duty clear." "Lillian, give us a moment," her father said. "Mr. Pawnee and I need to discuss arrangements." She wanted to protest, but saw the determination in both men's faces. Reluctantly, she left the room, closing the door behind her but lingering in the hallway. Their voices were low, and she caught only fragments. "Payment. Grateful for your service. When this is resolved." Then her father's voice rose slightly. "My daughter deserves better than a life on the run." Geeton's reply was too soft to hear, but whatever he said must have been powerful, for when her father spoke again, his tone had changed. "I believe you mean that, but meaning well isn't enough." The conversation continued for several more minutes before the door opened. Both men looked grave but composed. Geeton nodded to her father, then walked past Lillian with just a brief glance. "I must prepare to leave," he said quietly. She followed him to the small room off the kitchen where he had been staying. "You're really going?" she asked as he gathered his few belongings. "Must. My people need me." "Your people or mine?" He paused in his packing to look at her. "Both. I try to prevent more bloodshed." "And us?" "What about what we discussed last night?" Geaton's expression softened. "Not forgotten, but timing wrong. This uprising make everything more difficult. If I take you with me now, people say I kidnap rancher's daughter. Make things worse for everyone." As much as she wanted to argue, Lillian knew he was right. The timing couldn't have been worse. "Will you come back?" she asked, hating how vulnerable she sounded. "If I can, when safe." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I meant what I say. You are the sky to my earth. Will always reach for you." Tears pricked at her eyes. "How will I know if you're safe? I send word when possible." He hesitated, then reached into his shirt and pulled out a small leather pouch on a cord. "Take this. Was my mother's. Protection." She accepted it, feeling the weight of something small and hard inside. "What is it?" "Turquoise stone. Sacred to my people. Keep it close." The gift felt significant, a tangible connection between them when words and promises seemed too fragile. She slipped it over her head, tucking it beneath her dress where it rested against her heart. "I'll wait for you," she promised. "However long it takes." He touched her cheek gently. "I not deserve such loyalty, but grateful for it." An hour later, Geaton Pawnee rode away from the Lawrence ranch, his posture straight, his eyes fixed on the distant mountains. Lillian watched until he was just a speck on the horizon, the turquoise stone warm against her skin, her heart both heavy and strangely at peace. She had found something rare and precious, and though circumstances forced them apart, she knew with absolute certainty that this was not the end of their story. The weeks that followed Geaton's departure were among the hardest of Lillian's life. News from Fort Bowie was sporadic and often contradictory. The uprising, it seemed, was both more and less serious than initially reported, a small band of warriors rather than a full tribal revolt, but determined and elusive in the harsh terrain. Lillian's father watched her carefully during this time, his expression a mixture of concern and relief. He clearly believed that Geaton's absence would cure what he considered a youthful infatuation. Lillian let him believe it, not having the energy to argue, while privately touching the turquoise stone whenever she felt her resolve weakening. A month passed with no word from Geaton. Then, too, Wallace settled into its usual rhythms, and Lillian forced herself to resume her normal activities, helping with the ranch accounts, visiting town for supplies, attending church on Sundays. She smiled when appropriate, spoke when spoken to, but inside, a part of her felt suspended, waiting. Harvey Peterson began calling at the ranch with increasing frequency, bringing small gifts and making transparent attempts to court her. Her father encouraged these visits, speaking highly of Harvey's character and prospects, until Lillian was finally forced to address the situation. "Pa," she said one evening as they sat on the porch after dinner, "I wish you wouldn't invite Mr. Peterson so often. It gives him false hope." George Lawrence sighed. "Lillian, it's been nearly 3 months. Whatever you thought you felt for Pawnee, surely you see now it was just excitement, the thrill of something different." "No, Pa, it wasn't." She fingered the turquoise stone that never left her neck. "What I felt, what I still feel is real. He's gone, Lillian, probably won't ever come back. And if he does, nothing has changed. He's still Apache, still has nothing to offer you. He offered me himself. That's all I wanted." Her father shook his head in frustration. "You're young, romantic. Life needs more than romance to sustain it." "Like what, Pa?" "Security, respectability." She turned to face him fully. "Those things are empty if there's no love. Your mother and I had a good marriage. It wasn't based on this. This wild passion you seem to think is so important." Did you love her? The question seemed to catch him off guard. Of course I did. In my way. And if someone had told you that you couldn't be with her because she wasn't suitable, would you have listened? Her father was silent for a long moment. That was different. Was it? Lillian stood, suddenly tired of the circular conversation. I'm not going to marry Harvey Peterson or anyone else just to please you or society. I'd rather be alone. As she turned to go inside, her father's voice stopped her. He won't come back, Lillian. Men like him don't settle down. Don't waste your life waiting. She paused but didn't turn around. That's my choice to make, Pa. Not yours. October turned to November, bringing cooler temperatures and shorter days. Lillian threw herself into ranch work, helping with the fall roundup, learning tasks that were traditionally men's domain. The physical labor helped distract her from the ache of missing Geeton, and the skills she acquired gave her a sense of competence she had never experienced before. It was during the roundup that Eduardo brought her news. He had been to town for supplies and heard that the Apache uprising had been resolved not through military victory but through negotiation. The renegade band had surrendered, agreeing to return to the reservation in exchange for promises of better conditions. And the scouts? Lillian asked, trying to keep her voice casual. Are they returning to Fort Bowie? Eduardo shrugged. Some, perhaps. Others were sent to different posts. The army moves men around like chess pieces. The news both encouraged and frustrated her. The conflict was over, which meant Geeton might be free to return, but if he had been reassigned, he could be anywhere in the territory. That night, she wrote a letter addressed to Geeton Pawnee, care of Fort Bowie. She poured her heart onto the pages, telling him she was waiting, that her feelings hadn't changed, that she hoped he was safe. Whether the letter would ever reach him was uncertain, but the act of writing it brought her comfort. The first snow fell in early December, light and melting quickly under the Arizona sun. Lillian stood at her bedroom window, watching the delicate flakes disappear almost as soon as they touched the ground, when she noticed a rider approaching from the east. Her heart leaped, then settled. The figure was too broad to be Geeton, the horse too heavy. Still, she hurried downstairs, curious about this visitor. Her father was already on the porch when she reached it. The rider drew closer, and Lillian recognized Colonel Harrison from Fort Bowie, the officer who had sent Geeton to them months ago. Colonel, her father greeted him, extending a hand. What brings you out this way? The colonel dismounted, shaking George Lawrence's hand. Mr. Lawrence. Miss Lawrence, he nodded to Lillian. I was passing through and thought I'd stop by. I have news that might interest you. They invited him inside, where Miguel served coffee. The colonel accepted gratefully, warming his hands on the cup. The situation with the renegades has been resolved, he informed them. Peaceful resolution, thank God. We lost fewer men than we might have. Good news, George Lawrence nodded. Any of your scouts among the casualties? Lillian held her breath, knowing her father had asked for her benefit, though he tried to sound merely conversational. 3 wounded, 1 killed, the colonel replied. Pawnee took a bullet in the shoulder, but he'll recover. Damn fine scout. Instrumental in the negotiations, actually. His knowledge of the language and customs proved invaluable. Relief flooded through Lillian so strongly she had to set down her coffee cup to hide the trembling of her hands. He's alive, then, she said softly. Colonel Harrison looked at her with sudden understanding. Yes, Miss Lawrence. Very much alive. In fact, he asked me to deliver something to you. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small package wrapped in doeskin and tied with sinew. Lillian accepted it with a murmured thank you, acutely aware of her father's watchful gaze. He also asked me to convey a message, the colonel continued. He said to tell you that the earth still reaches for the sky. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but he seemed to think you would understand." "Yes," Lillian whispered, clutching the package tightly. "I understand." After the colonel departed, having declined an invitation to stay for dinner, Lillian retreated to her room to open Geaton's gift in private. Inside the doeskin wrapping, she found a delicately carved wooden pendant. One side depicted mountains reaching upward, the other showed rain falling down, earth reaching for sky, sky reaching for earth. A simple leather cord was threaded through a small hole at the top. Wrapped around the pendant was a piece of paper with a message written in a careful hand. "I keep my promise. Will return when healed. Wait for me if you can, GP." Tears blurred Lillian's vision as she pressed the pendant to her lips. He was alive. He was coming back. It was enough for now. January brought harsh weather, keeping most of Wallace's residents close to home. Lillian used the time to prepare for Geaton's return, though she had no idea when that might be. She studied Apache customs in her father's small library of books, practiced her riding and shooting, and even persuaded Eduardo to teach her basic tracking skills. Her father watched these activities with growing concern but said little. Their relationship had become strained since Geaton's departure, a tension that neither seemed able to resolve. They spoke politely at meals, discussed ranch business when necessary, but the easy affection they had once shared was muted. It was Eduardo who first spotted the rider approaching through the February snow. "Miss Lillian," he called from the barn doorway where she was brushing down her horse. "Someone coming, riding Apache style." She rushed outside, shielding her eyes against the glare of sun on snow. The figure was still distant, but she would have recognized that fluid oneness with the horse anywhere. Geaton. Without waiting for Eduardo or informing her father, she swung onto her half-brushed horse and rode out to meet him, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. 3.5 months had passed. What if he had changed his mind? What if his feelings had cooled? As they drew closer to each other, she could see that he sat slightly favoring one side, the lingering effect of his wound, no doubt. But his posture was straight, his gaze steady as it found her across the diminishing space between them. They stopped their horses just a few feet apart. For a moment, neither spoke, simply drinking in the sight of each other. Geaton looked thinner, his face more weathered, a new scar visible at his temple. But his eyes were the same, dark, intelligent, filled with emotion as they met hers. "Lillian Lawrence," he said finally, her name on his lips like a prayer. "You came back," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I promise. Always keep promises." She noticed he wore civilian clothes, buckskins, but not his Army Scout attire. "Are you still with the Army?" He shook his head. "Finished, free now. Free to do what?" A smile touched his lips. "Free to build new life, if you still want." Instead of answering, she urged her horse forward until she was alongside him, then leaned across the small space between them to press her lips to his. The kiss was brief but certain, a reaffirmation of everything they had promised each other before he left. When she pulled back, his smile had widened. "Take as yes." "Yes," she confirmed. "Nothing has changed for me, has it for you? Only stronger now, more certain." His expression grew serious. "But your father," still opposed, "but he's had time to think, to see that my feelings aren't just a passing fancy." Geaton nodded thoughtfully. "Then we face him together, properly." They rode back to the ranch side by side, their horses moving in tandem as if reflecting their riders' harmony. George Lawrence was waiting on the porch, his face unreadable as he watched their approach. "Mr. Lawrence," Geaton called as they dismounted, "I return as promised, so I see." Her father's tone was neutral. "I assume you're here for my daughter, not my cattle." "Yes, sir, if she will have me." "And if I still object," Lillian stepped forward. Then we'll leave, Pa. I'm of age. I can make my own decisions. Her father's gaze shifted between them, measuring, assessing. Finally, he sighed deeply. Come inside, both of you. It's too cold for this conversation. They followed him into the parlor, where a fire crackled in the hearth. George Lawrence poured 3 glasses of whiskey, handing one to each of them before taking a seat. I've done a lot of thinking since you left, Pawnee, he began. Talked to people who know you. Colonel Harrison speaks highly of your character, says you saved lives during the uprising. Geaton inclined his head slightly but said nothing. I also received a letter from Judge Parker in Fort Smith. Apparently, you once testified in his court. He, too, vouches for your integrity. Her father took a sip of whiskey. Still doesn't change the fact that you're Apache. That life with you would be hard for my daughter. Yes, Geaton agreed simply, would be hard, but also good. I swear to protect her, provide for her, respect her always. And how do you plan to provide for her? You said you've left the army. Have savings, enough to buy small piece of land, build home. He glanced at Lillian. If that what she want? All eyes turned to her. I want to be with you, she said to Geaton. The details don't matter. Details always matter, her father countered. Good intentions don't put food on the table or a roof over your head. Geaton straightened in his chair. Mr. Lawrence, I understand your concern. As father, you protect daughter. Same in my culture. I not ask you give blessing without proof I worthy. He set down his untouched whiskey. I ask 1 year. 1 year to prove I can provide good life for Lillian. If after 1 year you still object, I accept judgment. George Lawrence studied him for a long moment. And during this year, what are your intentions toward my daughter, Honorable? We wait, court properly. Lillian wanted to object. A year seemed an eternity, but she held her tongue, recognizing the wisdom in Geaton's approach. He was offering her father a compromise, a way to save face while still moving toward acceptance. Her father drained his glass, then set it down decisively. 6 months. You have 6 months to establish yourself, to prove this isn't just some romantic fantasy. During that time, you may court my daughter, properly chaperoned visits, no more. If at the end of 6 months you've demonstrated that you can offer her a stable life, I will reconsider my position. It wasn't full acceptance, but it was more than Lillian had dared hope for. She looked at Geaton, who nodded slowly. Agreed, he said, extending his hand. George Lawrence hesitated only briefly before shaking it. Agreed. The next day, Geaton rode out again, but this time, Lillian knew where he was going and when he would return. He had purchased land 15 miles from the Lawrence Ranch, close enough for regular visits, but far enough to establish his independence. For the next 6 months, he would build a home there, working with his hands to create a place worthy of the woman he loved. True to his word, he returned every Sunday to court Lillian properly. They rode together, with Eduardo as chaperone, shared meals with her father, and talked for hours on the porch, watched over by Miguel's wife, who pretended to be busy with mending but missed nothing. During these visits, Lillian learned more about Geaton's life, his childhood among his mother's people, his education at a mission school where he learned English, his years as a scout for the army. He spoke of his dreams for their future together, of the house he was building, of the life they could create that bridged both their worlds. In turn, she shared her own hopes and fears, her memories of her mother, her frustrations with the limitations placed on her as a woman. With Geaton, she could be completely herself, unguarded and honest in a way she had never been with anyone else. As the months passed, Lillian noticed subtle changes in her father's attitude. He began to engage Geaton in real conversation, to ask his opinion on matters related to the ranch, to occasionally laugh at his dry observations. The formal Mr. Pawnee gradually gave way to Geeton, a small but significant shift. 4 months into their agreement, a wildfire threatened the region. Geeton arrived at the ranch not on his regular Sunday but in the middle of the week, riding hard through smoke-filled air. "Fire coming," he announced without preamble. "From west. Moving fast." George Lawrence immediately mobilized his ranch hands, sending riders to warn neighbors, organizing teams to create fire breaks. Geeton worked alongside them, his knowledge of the land and fire behavior proving invaluable as they fought to protect the ranch and its cattle. For 3 days they battled the flames, grabbing sleep in short shifts, faces blackened with soot, lungs burning from smoke. Lillian refused to remain safely at the house, instead bringing water to the men, tending to minor burns, and even helping to dig fire breaks when extra hands were needed. At one point, a sudden shift in the wind sent flames racing toward a group of trapped cattle. Without hesitation, Geeton rode directly into the smoke, guiding the panicked animals to safety but suffering burns on his arms and back in the process. When it was finally over, the fire defeated through their combined efforts. George Lawrence found Geeton as Lillian was treating his burns. For a long moment, the older man simply looked at them, his daughter's gentle hands ministering to Geeton's wounds, the tender concern in her eyes, the stoic gratitude in his. "You saved a good portion of my herd," George said finally. "Risked your life to do it." Geeton nodded once in acknowledgement. "Would do same for own land, own family." "Yes, I believe you would." Her father's voice had softened. "When you're healed, we should discuss moving up our timeline. Seems to me 6 months might be longer than necessary." The look of hope that dawned on Lillian's face was matched by the quiet joy in Geeton's eyes. "Thank you, sir." 2 weeks later, her father accompanied them to Geeton's land for the first time. The house he had built was modest but solid, constructed of timber and stone with a wide porch that caught the breeze. Inside, the main room was bright with windows, the furniture simple but well crafted by Geeton's own hands. "It's beautiful," Lillian breathed as she walked through the rooms, envisioning their life together in this place. "Still much to do," Geeton said, watching her reaction carefully. "But good start." George Lawrence inspected everything with a critical eye: the roof, the foundations, the small corral for horses, the beginnings of a garden. Finally, he turned to Geeton. "You've worked hard, built something real." He glanced at his daughter, whose happiness was evident in every line of her face. "I'm not saying it will be easy. There will be people who don't understand, who will make things difficult for both of you." "We know, Pa," Lillian said softly. "But I can see now that what you have is genuine, and I was wrong to try to stand in its way." He took a deep breath, as if the next words were difficult. "You have my blessing if you still want it." Tears sprang to Lillian's eyes as she embraced her father. "Thank you, Pa. It means everything to have your support." Geeton stepped forward, his expression solemn. "Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. I swear I not disappoint your trust. See that you don't." But the words held no sting, softened by the hint of a smile. "And I think, under the circumstances, you might start calling me George." They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch. The guest list was small ranch hands, a few neighbors who had come to respect Geeton during the fire, Colonel Harrison, and a handful of Army colleagues who had worked with him. Lillian wore her mother's wedding dress, altered by Miguel's wife to fit her slender frame. Geeton wore a new suit, looking somewhat uncomfortable in the formal attire, but handsome nonetheless. The local minister performed the ceremony, his initial reluctance overcome by George Lawrence's influence and Geeton's quiet dignity. As they spoke their vows beneath an arbor of desert flowers, Geeton slipped a silver ring onto Lillian's finger, a band engraved with mountains and raindrops, earth and sky eternally linked. The symbolism brought fresh tears to her eyes. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. And for the first time, Geeton kissed her publicly, sealing their union before witnesses from both their worlds. The celebration that followed was a blend of traditions: ranch barbecue and Apache music, cowboy songs and native dances. As night fell, lanterns illuminated the yard, and the couple moved among their guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes. When they finally had a moment alone, Geeton led Lillian to the spot where they had first truly talked, the rock overlooking the valley. Above them, the stars spread across the vast Arizona sky, brilliant and infinite. "Happy?" he asked softly, his arms encircling her waist. "More than I ever thought possible." She leaned back against him, savoring his warmth, the steady beat of his heart against her back. "Long journey to reach this moment," he murmured, his lips close to her ear. "Worth every step." "The journey's just beginning," she reminded him, turning in his arms to face him. He smiled, touching her cheek gently. "Yes, many miles ahead, but we walk together now." As he kissed her beneath the endless sky, Lillian knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as one, the rancher's daughter and her Apache scout. Earth and sky united at last. Epilogue: 5 years later, the sound of children's laughter floated on the summer breeze as Lillian stepped onto the porch of their home. The house had grown over the years, additional rooms added as their family expanded, the garden now lush with vegetables and herbs. In the yard, Geeton was teaching their 4-year-old son, Thomas, to identify animal tracks in the soft earth. Nearby, 2-year-old Clara toddled after a butterfly, her dark curls bouncing with each step. Both children had inherited their father's deep eyes and their mother's determined spirit, a perfect blend of their dual heritage. "Mama," Thomas called, spotting her. "Papa, show me deer tracks." "Wonderful," she called back, smiling at her son's enthusiasm. "Dinner's almost ready. Go wash up, both of you." As Geeton gathered Clara into his arms, prompting giggles as he tickled her, Lillian felt the familiar warmth of contentment spread through her chest. Their life wasn't always easy. There had been hardships, prejudices to overcome, difficult seasons when crops failed or illness struck. But through it all, their bond had only strengthened, their love deepening with each challenge faced together. George Lawrence rode over regularly, doting on his grandchildren, bringing gifts and stories. The rift between father and daughter had healed completely, replaced by a new respect as George came to appreciate the man Geeton had proved himself to be: hardworking, honorable, and deeply devoted to Lillian and their children. Their small ranch had prospered. Geeton's knowledge of the land, combined with Lillian's business sense, creating a modest but sustainable living. They raised horses, grew crops suited to the desert climate, and occasionally hosted travelers who paid for Geeton's services as a guide through the more remote parts of the territory. As her family entered the house, Lillian touched the wooden pendant she still wore daily: earth reaching for sky, sky reaching for earth. It had become a talisman of sorts, a reminder of the journey that had brought them together. "Something wrong?" Geeton asked, setting Clara in her chair at the table. Lillian shook her head, smiling. "Just thinking how fortunate we are." Later that night, with the children asleep and the house quiet, they sat on their porch beneath a canopy of stars, Geeton's arm around her shoulders, Lillian's head resting against his chest. "No regrets?" he asked softly, a question he still posed occasionally, as if to reassure himself that she was truly content with the life they had built. "None," she answered truthfully. "Every choice led us here, and here is exactly where I want to be." He kissed the top of her head, a gesture of tender familiarity. "You are still the sky to my earth, Lillian Pawnee, vast, beautiful, full of light." "And you are still the earth to my sky," she replied, nestling closer. "Strong, steady, always reaching." Together they watched as a shooting star traced a brilliant path across the heavens. Earth and sky united in perfect harmony under the vast Arizona sky.